Hello, welcome back. Now, one more hopefully quick conversation to have with you guys about the process of getting to the point in Exceed where you can make sensible plays. This is the fourth episode I've recorded now. The first was on breakpoints. The second was on the speed curve and the speed triangle. The third was on kind of the positional game of Exceed and specifically what to do with cross. This one is going to be about a couple things. One, just kind of attacking and defending, and kind of your thought process about what both of those things mean and why you should do them and when. And then I wanted to do a quick little bit about uh, sort of like a live fire exercise of forming attacks and forming useful shapes. Um, so this whole time we've been talking about the Kai versus Soul matchup, and that's sort of been our grounding foundational thing we keep returning to as our examples. And I'm gonna try to maintain that. But this again sort of applies pretty generally, the stuff I'm talking about. Um, at some point, if you've played enough Exceed, it doesn't take super long for some people, you will have noticed that it didn't really seem worth it to initiate with a card. Often the card that people are talking about when they say things like this are sweep and focus, because it occurs to them that uh, those cards could have done everything that they did just as well on their opponent's turn, right? So in we keep using this kind of classic example here of Soul and Kai. Soul initiates with Grasp. Kai defends with Sweep, or Kai initiates with Grasp. I'm sorry, Kai initiates with Sweep, Soul defends with Grasp. These outcomes are essentially equivalent, right? So the Kai player might be looking at Sweep in his hand on his turn and saying, why would I initiate with this? It does everything I want it to on defense just as well. And sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. And learning how to tell the difference between when you should use a card on offense and when you should use it on defense, I think is another kind of foundational skill that will help quite a bit in Exceed. So I think that there are kind of three reasons that you would attack with a given card, right? The most obvious one is that the attacking player wins speed ties. So this is most obvious for our pokes, right? If I initiate with Grasp and my opponent defends with Grasp, I win cleanly, and they don't get to do anything. So when your card particularly cares about speed, you often will want to initiate with it because it will be it'll be more likely to work, right? And I'm going to return to that idea in just a second here. But I don't want you to discount that often initiating with a card that doesn't seem to care about speed might be very relevant. Partially because just because it's not trying to go fast doesn't mean it doesn't care about speed ties. The example I would give is Sweep here. We talked a while ago about cards like, I think the example we used was Giovanna's. I called it not a very good slow in the first lesson here when we were still talking about breakpoints. Travau, this guy, and I didn't mention it at the time, but the reason that Travau is not a very good slow is because it only has 5 guard, and we would expect a card as slow as Sweep to have Sweep's guard. Similar, actually, to how, where did I put my soul reference here? Similar to what we saw on Night Raid Vortex, right? These two cards look very similar, except one has 5 guard, one has 6 guard. The reason I called this a bad slow is because if I initiate into Giovanna with Sweep, Sweep wins the speed tie and crushes Travau. And that doesn't feel great. I think I mentioned at the time, you really don't want to lose cleanly to sweep. You want to at least trade with it. Well, that only matters if you're occasionally willing to initiate with sweep. Because we just got done saying, well, it seems to do everything that it can do. It seems to do everything that it does on offense just as well on defense. Why would I waste my whole turn attacking with it? Well, if your opponent is thinking that Travau is a bad defensive card specifically because sweep exists and you won't play a sweep on offense, then you just given them a card just as good as Night Raid Vortex for free. So sometimes, even when it's not obvious that a card cares about winning a speed tie, it does. Similarly, Dust is not only might care about winning a speed 3 speed tie, but many of the cards that it's trying to handle are particularly good on defense. These 3 cards in particular, we just got done saying, well, why would you bother ever initiating with them? I'll save them for defense. Dust gets to say, cool, I get to prey on the cards that my opponent is saving for defense. I better initiate with it. So there's situations like that when you would want to initiate with a card, when you care about speed. As Exceed has evolved, it has gotten a little bit more offensive. There are many characters whose cards are very carefully formulated, actually very similar to Travau. Giovanna is a very offensive character. She's a character who wants to be striking a lot. Her character ability supports that. This is why her slow isn't super. It doesn't feel great defensively. Because you want to be using this card on offense where it can at least beat Sweep's speed tie. It can win the speed tie with Sweep, rather. So as Exceed has evolved, it's gotten a little bit more offensive. More and more characters' cards are specifically formulated to care about speed ties. More and more characters have also evolved to. This is the second reason you might want to attack. More and more characters have evolved to have character abilities or other boosts like cancels, other benefits like cancels, I should say, cancelable boosts that would make their that would make things only work on their turn. Basically, we saw this very regularly in the Undernight season. Many of the characters had a character ability that was an action that could only happen on their turn. Many of them caused a strike. If you want to do that, it needs to be on your turn. Similarly, quite a few Guilty Gear characters, actually, Kai and Soul, both have this property. Their character abilities work on cancels. You can only cancel on your turn. If you're canceling into a strike, which you often are, you can only do it on your turn. You're going to have to be initiating. It's another reason that you might want to initiate with a strike when your character ability gives you a reason to, right? The third reason, and I think probably the most nebulous and also probably the most important, that you would want to initiate with a given strike or a given card is when you have reason to believe that the conditions that would make that card good are temporary. So we talked quite a bit about in the last lesson what to do with cross. And when your opponent is cornered, let's move these cards really quick. When your opponent is cornered, they can no longer cross out of your sweep, right? Because they have nowhere to go. So I've got my opponent in the corner, and I know their dives are down, right? I feel like I have them in a perfect position to sweep them. And then something in the back of my head says, why bother? Why not throw Let's Rock? My opponent is stuck here. They can't really do anything meaningfully threatening to me. I have a perfect card to hit them with. Why wouldn't I just up my advantage while I have it? And then I can use this perfectly good defensive card to punish them when they try to attack me, if they try to attack me. Well, because it's very possible that Soul, I mean, I'm not sure if Soul would do this particular sequence of moves given the character that he is, but a player could very easily see this situation, see you pass turn to them, and go, awesome, boost dash, 1, 2, 3, strike with cross, 1, 2, 3. I've just made a whole lot of space on you, and you no longer have that confirm that you thought you did. Right? That's again, for Soul, that's a pretty extreme example. Pretend you're fighting Testament or something. But so the third reason that you would strike now on your turn rather than passing turn to your opponent is when you think that the time is right. This is a skill that you really do need to develop. That calculation changes based on how many resources your opponent has. If they need to prep, for example, if they really just don't have the cards they need to get out of a situation, all they can do is some economic management on their turn, it might be really legitimate to be able to say, awesome, let's rock. Pass turn to you, I see you prep, strike with sweep now. It might be that you know for a fact that all of their big movement options are down already. They don't have their dives, they don't have their dashes. They really are stuck here. So kind of the macroeconomic situation can inform this. So all of this stuff is difficult, and it's something that requires quite a bit of understanding of the game to get kind of okay at. This one in particular, I think, is much harder to get a grasp on than, well, I need to win a speed tie, so I might as well strike here, or well, my character ability says strike, so I might as well strike here. So as you're playing, pay attention to situations where you think you've got your opponent kind of dead to rights, and just weigh what would happen if they happened to have that copy of dash that they could use to get out of the corner on you. A similar idea often happens with ultras, where this is a very like decision paralysis moment for people, where they've spent all game building the 3 or 4 gauge they need for a big payout, and they're trying to determine whether the time is right. And by the time they actually get around to pulling the trigger, the situation has changed so much that it's no longer it's no longer the right time to use it. Maybe now you use it as a boost or something else. So it like this takes there's a lot of nuance to this one. It takes quite a bit of skill, I think, to develop this. Those are the 3 times, I think, the 3 kind of broad categories in which you might want to attack and exceed. And they're broad enough that really you want to attack quite frequently, especially now in more recent seasons. There were times long ago when a legitimate playstyle, this is sometimes called taxi meta, was kind of engendered more passive, more sort of jockeying for position, boost heavy play. The game has moved pretty heavily away from that in the past several seasons. A lot of its principles are still very relevant. If you can win on your opponent's turn, do it, because man, is that devastating. If your opponent spends their whole turn and you still cleanly beat them, that's a potentially very crushing loss. And if you can use your turn to set up those situations, do it. That's a very strong way to play the game. But keep in mind that attacking is often a time-limited or resource-limited thing, and you kind of need to take your shots when you can get them. Speaking of the sort of taxi meta idea of winning on your opponent's turn, there's another element of this that I want to discuss, which is how to use your opponent's turns effectively. Obviously, you can only do this when you have some point of interaction with them, which is going to happen when they're striking. This idea I talked with Taxi a couple of years ago. He was one of the people who taught me how to play Exceed. Taxi of Taxi Meta fame, and the way he explained it to me was, every time your opponent strikes into you, unless they struck with assault or slash that gains advantage, their card has hit or clean up your opponent gains advantage on it. It is important that by attacking, you are giving your turn to the opponent. while also letting them do something. You're spending their turn attacking, they're spending your turn attacking. That's a real advantage if you can leverage it. So let's talk about some ways that you could leverage it. And I'm going to sound a little bit contradictory here for a second because I just got done talking about how you often want to use your cards that really care about winning speed ties on offense in situations where they are most likely to go off. But let's consider something about these cards, which is that they all have some kind of movement on them, either movement of the opponent or movement of you, right? And I think one of the marks of a good Exceed player is how they're able to use their opponent's strikes to set a board state that's favorable to them. So, yes, it is true that if I am at range 1 with Soul, and this is probably a bad spot. Let's talk about it maybe right here. I'm at range 1 with Soul. It's my turn. I have a Grasp in my hand. It make a lot of sense to use it right now and set. Right. Let's say I have I don't know. You know what here? Yeah. Let's say I have we spend a little bit of time talking about this combination of cards. Oops. Thunder Seal into range 3 Dire Clay as being just a particularly mean, nasty combo, right? Maybe we can even make it stronger and scarier by saying we got something like this, right? This is probably just like fairly close to unbeatable. I sweep notwithstanding, I think maybe in this position it's even worse. Yeah, let's say we're right here and we're trying to set up this amazing this is our hand. And we're trying to set up this amazing sequence of plays where we've got the 2 gauge and we say Vapor Thrust cancel, Thunder Seal cancel, Grasp, throw them to range 3, cancel, Dire Clay. That's what we're thinking we're going to do. And Grasp is this obvious way to set the range that we want to use our awesome combo on, right? So we spend our turn striking with Grasp. And then Soul, whose hand, we don't know this, is, I don't know, Gunflame and Wild Throw. And maybe a couple other cards, right? He's got these 2. He sees that he's been set to range 3, and on his turn goes, sick, okay, I'll come back in, gain advantage, and then throw a mix-up with Wild Throw. And we don't have the ability to defend against that particularly well, right? We don't really have any answers at all for Gunflame. We might Wild Swing there. And Wild Throw, we'd have to take a gamble. So I've used the card in the situation when I've used Grasp, the card in the situation when it is most likely to work, and then ceded the turn to my opponent. Let's consider the exact same thing that would happen if I used Grasp on defense instead. It loses to way more things, right? For one thing, it loses to my opponent's Grasps. It's also much more likely that Soul would be striking with something like Wild Throw on his turn rather than my turn. All those calculations can go into this as well, because he might be trying to do a big payout, and Wild Throw would beat Grasp pretty hard. But let's pretend that he's trying to get away by throwing Cross or something like that. I'm not sure. Whatever he's doing. We throw Grasp on defense. Now we've set our range, and now it's our turn, and we get to immediately do this combo before Soul has an opportunity to react. So Grasp is a card that is much more likely to work on offense because it's on a curve at 1 and there's very few things faster than it. It's more likely to do the thing it's supposed to do, but the reward for hitting it is often higher when you use it on defense. This is true of basically every card that has some kind of movement component to it. If it's setting a board state that you want to be able to take advantage of it as quickly as possible. This is one of the reasons why slash or assault is so powerful, because it has advantage on it. So you can use this on offense and say, hey, awesome, it's my turn and I'm at range 1 right now, hitting you with a thing that I wanted to do at range 1 anyway. That's very strong. Cross has a similar property. I think we already talked earlier in an earlier episode about using cross at range 1 sometimes, even though it's on curve at range 2. Partially just because, hey, sometimes you're at range 1. But also because setting range 4, you'll often have more plays you can make. Getting back in from range 4 or throwing a meaningful threat from range 4 than you would at range 5. So we're already kind of accepting of the idea of using cross when it's under curve. And you can sort of kind of think of using any fast card on defense as being kind of de facto under curve, below curve, because it loses speed ties. So it sort of effectively has like half a point of speed lower or something like that than it normally would. Anyway, we're already okay with occasionally using cross at range 1. If we use cross at range 1 and on defense, now we're we would lose to our example last time of a scary range 1 speed 6 button is Faust's snip, snip, snip. We'd lose to that now. We're incurring, 2 different factors worth of risk by playing cross in this position. But if we have a perfect follow-up, if we're playing Testament, for example, and we want to establish a zoning pattern, we really can't afford to cross out on our turn from here to range 5, and then our opponent sees that we're up against a zoner like Testament and says, okay, cool, I spend my turn walking back in, and now you're close to the corner. So learning to use your movement to set favorable positions on your opponent's turn means that you're going to be able to use your turn paying out and doing the thing that you've been trying to do. Often, something that I've noticed many players kind of struggle with is they have this awesome setup, and all they need is one more turn. And the thing that I always think to myself in situations like that, when I have my opponent right where I want them, and I'm just thinking to myself over and over again, just prep. Just prepare. Just take your turn preparing and give me the turn back. Don't move, don't boost. Just give me the turn. That happens a lot less when you're using your opponent's turn to set them where you want them. This is also one of, I think I mentioned before in the first lesson, that focus is one of like the all-star defensive cards ever. It's amazing, right? It's super, super bulky, it's super guardy, it's very consistent, but it also has this you cannot be pushed or pulled on it. And that can diffuse a lot of those tricky movement setups, which means that sometimes focus actually is a very strong card that you can use on offense because it's very consistent and it will help diffuse those tricky defensive grasp setups that I'm trying to do to set my favorite range on your turn. That doesn't work into focus. At least that one doesn't. Cross still might. You might have to look for a one of the rare your opponent can't move cards for that. Or you might scout the cross with a Night Raid Vortex. Wherever I put that card. It may be lost forever. It's probably in here somewhere. We know Night Raid Vortex, though. We saw it 20 times in the first lesson. Here's an NRV. You scout the cross from range 1 by initiating with Night Raid Vortex, and then Kai, thinking he's being all clever to set up a Stun Dipper play, backs up 3, and then you chase him right down again, and you're right where you had him before. So sometimes you want to initiate with cards specifically to counter what you think your opponent is going to try to use your turn to do. And that's sort of, now we're several Yomi layers deep into this game. We're in some real I know territory. But the upshot of all this is we need to adjust our heuristics a little bit from before, when this is, initiate with your pokes, put speed on mid speeds, things like that, to remember that often the sort of easy, correct call is uh, in context, you might be giving up some value, or you might need to do the game state demands that you might need to do something that is, theoretically suboptimal. The number of times that I have won a game off of a range one assault under curve, but I need advantage right now I need to get rid of a boost setup that my opponent has, so I need a strike to happen. And I need it to be my turn afterward. This is the only thing that does that, and I'm not at the right range to do it. So let's take that gamble and see if it pays off. These things happen a lot in Exceed because Exceed is not a game where you can say, I have a card in my hand that is at range 3 and I need to be at range 3. So I'm just going to spend my turn doing that and hope my opponent doesn't do anything to stop me. You'll often be in situations where you need to either make the best of a bad situation or find ways to make a bad situation much, much better for you. And all this stuff obviously gets complicated even further when we talk about things like hand management. Certainly long-term strategizing and economic management. That's all stuff that I think is probably beyond the scope of conversations like this. But that's basically the upshot of what I wanted to explain today. The last thing I want to do is, I think I mentioned like a little live fire exercise of how to evaluate plays in the moment, right? And all I want to do here let's just move these. I have a fresh deck. And all I'm going to do is just deal myself a hand of cards and just really quickly put a couple shapes together. We already did this with character kits. We basically like looked at I don't know, Jin or Giovanna and just like said, all right, that's a slow, that's a mid speed. Okay, I understand sort of the basic shape of their kit. Now let's start just practicing making powerful shapes. So let's see what we have here. And obviously, like, maybe I might say at some point that, well, if I'm here, this would be really good, or if I'm here, this would be really good, or if I had 3 gauge, this would be great, or something. And we can kind of adjust the game state as we're going, because this is all just hypothetical anyway. So what do we have here? We've got Stun Edge, we've got Slash, Dire Clay, Sacred Edge, Sweep. Okay, so let's see here. I've got as a possibility, just a bunch of possibilities. I could hang out at range 3, put Badass down, have Slash on deck for an above curve range 3 option if I needed that. I could, if I had a little bit of gauge, I could cancel or perhaps cancel to either advance or retreat to threaten either Stun Edge or maybe Dire Clay. I could. Would I feel comfortable prepping here? Do I have any above curve options? Do I have anything that feels very, very good on defense in this position? No, not really. So I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about what my opponent has access to. How many resources do they have? Obviously, we're not simulating all of this. Maybe I just am happy throwing, maybe I want to sort of dedicate myself a little bit more to playing a bit of keep away and I need some resources. Maybe Roar the Spark, cancel into Faith. Being ready to either throw the mix-up of Stun Edge or Sweep. Maybe I want to actually be closer and do something very similar and just throw this to here and just have either Dire Clay or Stun Edge ready. These are the kinds of evaluations you can make again quite quickly. And this is from a hand that I haven't really crafted. I'm not really like thinking about like, well, this is one half of a great combo. I'll keep this card for later and wait to draw into another one, or I'm going to dig with Roar the Spark for more or something like that. Just kind of taking what I get. Let's go grab another hand really fast. Let's grab a hand of 5. We got an EX. That's awesome. Okay. So I could, if I wanted to, feel very comfortable hanging out at range 1 and being willing to do something like prepare or put down a bonus power source because I have uh, an EX, a speed 8 that I could, if I wanted to, use on defense and still be quite likely to hit. I could start to look for ways to leverage area shift to corner Soul if I wasn't already in a position like this. For example, if I'm here, area shift Foudra Arc feels perfectly legitimate here, or even area shift into Let's Rock if I feel comfortable passing the turn. Similarly, if I if I had enough to get Ride the Lightning going, finding a way, honestly, any of these power boosts, if I'm comfortable striking with Ride the Lightning on defense, which I often would be, having a little bit of extra power to deal with a sweep or something like that would be quite beneficial. I also have Thunder Seal, which is a bonus range and some extra power that can make plays like Thunder Seal cancel or no cancel actually into Grasp. Very strong. It's actually quite difficult to deal with a range 2 Grasp because all of those interactions we were saying before about how Grasp loses to Sweep. Well, if you can throw Sweep far enough, great. It no longer loses to it. So I would be perfectly happy putting down Thunder Seal as a boost, canceling to back up and then prepping, or maybe just striking with the Grasp right here and being comfortable. Either way, I have an above curve option that I'm satisfied with. In this situation, I'd probably just prep or maybe put down Shock State or something and say, trust me, you don't want to strike into me here because I've got something that can probably honestly deal with most things that you're going to throw. If I wasn't comfortable throwing Shock State, put Thundersteel down, strike with Grasp, throw them to range, follow up with Foudra Arc later, or have something ready, or even just be ready to area shift around or something like that. Like there's plenty of options based on what my opponent has. Obviously, if I'm dealing with Soul and he has 2 gauge, enough for Tyrant Wraith, his own above curve range 2 option, range 2 option, this Thunder Seal into Grasp is no longer applicable. So maybe if I'm feeling particularly gutsy, I know he's got Tyrant Rave. We're here. Thunder Seal, back up. Cancel. Sorry, Thunder Seal, cancel, back up. Shock State, past turn, he strikes with Tyrant Rave, expecting my Grasp, and I hit him with the EX Grasp. I've just emptied my entire hand. I have no idea if that's strong in the long term, but that's a very, I think, legitimate way to use my hand. I would have drawn another card off of Shock State, 2 cards actually off of Shock State. There's a decent chance that I have a follow up there because Kai has a lot of range 4 options. That's a fairly real play, I feel like. Let's do one more really fast. And you can just do this. This is a really, really easy exercise of just like combining shapes together and figuring out what works, what doesn't. And and I'm doing this pretty fast, right? I'm sure I'm missing things, but I'm also just using quite a bit of fundamental Exceed knowledge to read these cards pretty quick, right? So if you don't have that, if you're still quite new and don't really have the ability to say like, oh, well, range 2 Grasp is amazing, I'll just find a way to leverage that, go and grab your opponent's cards, deal yourself a hand, make some shapes, and then look at what they have that can answer those shapes. It's a way more tedious process that way, but the more you do that, the more your vocabulary kind of expands and the faster you can do it later. Let's just do one more really quick. Okay, so what do we have here? We've got a whole lot of speed boosts and a couple of mid speeds. So this seems like a complete no-brainer to me. Having, if I'm here or if I'm here, and have a follow-up like sweep close range, Holy Orders back up, cancel to back up into dive, Probably unstoppable, assuming he doesn't cross out. And even if he does cross out, honestly, I have a pretty solid follow-up in stun edge at range 2 from the corner. That seems okay. Or dust from the corner. Both are very strong. That's a legitimate mix-up there. So that's very, very cool. I could do a similar thing with Badass if I don't feel like gaining advantage and want to do a little bit more damage. I could even do a similar thing with Be Just or Be Dead and just get some a little bit of economics going. If I'm more worried about dealing damage than I am about winning combat cleanly, almost the exact same combination works with Dust. I could even, if I want to, as I mentioned in the very first conversation here, put down 2 speed boosts, throw a Dust, or even 3 speed boosts, throw a Dust, and I'm free from having to worry about cross now. That's probably a little excessive. If I was in a bad situation, right, if I was here, I have a couple of options, or even here maybe, I have a couple of options. I could use Vapor Thrust to get out of the corner into Dust or Stun Edge. I could Vapor Thrust out of the corner into Badass, back up into Dive back into the corner. So plenty of options with this many speed boosts and a couple of mid speeds in play. This is no problem. I might be evaluating Dive differently in a different matchup. I have a feeling, this might be a player read or just people in my experience who play Soul. I feel like this is a common thing, but they don't often leave Ukemi. I'm sorry, they don't often leave continuous boosts out long enough for me to Ukemi because they're often canceling them. So maybe I lean a little more heavily on Dive than on Dust because maybe I need this faultless defense to deal with Soul's crazy power values that he can sometimes throw. But maybe I throw the Dust instead of the Dive because my hand, instead of one of these cards, is Foudre Arc or maybe Stun Dipper, and I want to maintain some range. Dust is a card that doesn't move me in. Holy Order's Dust means that I can stay at range 3, throw the mix-up I want to throw, and then have a follow-up like Foudre Arc or another speed boost into Dive, for example. So I could say, like here, let's move these cards really quick. I'm sure I'm really in the weeds now. But basically, Holy Orders +1 speed gain advantage cancel into Dive. Probably win combat for free, gain advantage, stun edge, cancel into Dust. That works, but I'm throwing myself into the corner to do it. Or cancel out of it versus and throwing Sweep or something like that, right? Like those are real options. Doing the exact same thing in a different sequence, throwing the Dust first, and now I still have the Dive or the Foudre Arc to be able to move in with the advantage if I wanted to, from further out from so I could if I wanted to. Actually, I'd wind up in very similar places if I did Vapor Thrust, Dust. No, actually, I wouldn't. Yeah, I would. Vapor Thrust, Holy Order's Dust, hit, gain advantage, another speed boost, cancel, back up into Dive. Then I'm losing out on Dive's mid-speed properties in favor of being on curve. All of these considerations, it matters who I'm playing against. Whether like Soul doesn't have any above curve options at 4, for example. I know that, and I might not need to back up to go to range 4 if I have a speed boost in play for Dive. There are so many factors that can influence decisions like this, but the upshot here is that I think it's very important to just get used to looking at a hand and saying, this could work. Oh, these things together are strong, right? And all I'm really doing is combining the things that I've talked about in the previous conversations. So we had in that big long sequence of how do I layer all these things together. We were talking breakpoints with our we had some power boosts into Sweep conversation, I think, in there somewhere to hit 7. We had speed curve, plenty of speed curve stuff. We had plenty of positional stuff. We had plenty of turn order and sequencing stuff, doing things on offense versus on defense. So all I'm doing is just combining those kind of four principles and some heuristics that we developed along the way, talking about them, to be able to, again, I think this is making sensible plays. That's not alone going to win you a game against a really good player who is kind of doing that as well and also has better macroeconomic management than you do. But against somebody of your skill level, another newer player, just kind of thinking in the short term about what strong things you can do with your hand, or that you have 2/3 of an awesome combo and now I have to look for the last third that's going to be my target, or I have to save this because it's a great part of the combo. Those kinds of considerations are very, very, very strong until you can level up enough to stop them. So do your best to get yourself to that level. And make sensible plays, make plays that feel strong based on the principles that we've discussed. And then as that comes easier to you, devote more and more of your brain to the long term, to tracking your opponent's discard pile, to noticing important options go down. And sort of as the short term becomes easier, just begin to kind of sprinkle in some longer term decision making. And hopefully then you will be having fun playing Exceed, making good plays while you're learning, win or lose. It feels a lot better to think about the game this way than where some people start, which is kind of feeling like the cards are kind of random and the whole game is just hard reads. It's really not. It's resource management and intelligent use of your resources to make difficult to deal with combinations while still maintaining some resource pressure. That's a difficult thing, but it's a way more interesting thing than rock, paper, scissors, which I think is what some people think Exceed is. That's it. I've talked for way too long about this stuff at this point. I hope that, again, this was useful. There was no script the entire time. I definitely was just kind of like blabbering, as I am wont to do. So if anyone was concerned about me making something short form for once, they did not have to worry. But yeah, I hope people have fun with this. Go play Exceed. It's a good game. Thanks all for your time. I will hopefully get back to making some actual character guides soon. Oh, that's actually probably worth mentioning too. I make character guides. That's kind of what the channel is all of the characters. Once you've got this stuff down, go find a character that you like, see if I've made a guide for them, and combine these principles. This is sort of like this is where I was before I started learning characters. Start to, find a character that you like and watch the guide with these principles in mind and apply them specifically to that character. I feel like that's a pretty holistic way to learn. Anyway, as mentioned, blabbed too long. Didn't make anything short form, all that stuff. Thanks so much for your time. I will hopefully get back to making more character guides soon. I will see you around. Bye, everybody.